We are obviously very delighted to have Edward back in committee with us, sitting almost where he used to when he was a vice president of the committee. And I have to thank him very much for the work that he did then, especially on statistics files, work that has now moved on, and I'm being assisted by others on that. So welcome to the committee. I think we can afford, because it's a Thursday and therefore many members have had to travel back to their member states, we can afford to be probably more relaxed if you give your introductory statements, and then we'll do questions and answers in the 5 minutes, and there's probably enough time for you to maybe say a bit more at the end. So we'll use all the time, I'm sure. Anyway, I'm glad to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sharon. It's also a great pleasure for me to be back in ECON, where I've been here for about 4 years. Obviously now I'm in a place where I'm supposed to practice what we had preached here in committee, because this is actually what it is to translate. Hello, Elisa. You're just coming here. Hi. Which is good fiscal governance, financial stability, growth-friendly measures, the problem between how much the programs would be towards austerity or towards growth. You start applying what we had discussed for weeks and weeks and weeks, the two-pack, and now you're at the other end and you have to apply it. And so it's quite interesting, and I'm ready to share that experience with you, especially with the economic semester, the excessive deficit procedure. Well, my country is sampling a little bit of everything there. It was, over these 9 months, I would say, it was also a record, because I know very few ministers, finance ministers, who had to present and approve 2 budgets in 1 year. The reason was that the budget was unapproved, the one we were faced with in March for that year. So we had to approve it very quickly, but at the same time revise it and tweak it to bring it down to reality, in the sense of what would be a realistic forecast for economic growth, and also what sort of revenues and deficit. Those had to be revised, especially when we were faced with the news, which we didn't like at all, that Malta once again got into the excessive deficit bracket and therefore procedure. Just after a few months, it was announced that it had come out of it. So it was quite embarrassing for the Commission, quite embarrassing for us. But the story is that, as you know, electoral campaigns and political uncertainty, especially when you are faced with a weak government, the previous government, we had a 1-seat majority, and that caused consumption to fall, and therefore revenues fell, and expenditures remained what they were, and therefore what was forecasted to be just 2.4% became 3.3% of GDP. Now, however, the economy at that time was moving. It was moving slowly. I likened it with when I had spoken with Olli Rehn to a sailing boat where there is a little bit of wind just, and I was very attentive not to lose its momentum, because that was quite important. So when we met with Olli Rehn and faced the possibility of being presented with a sort of an austere budget cuts, we had argued that we would do it. We would take effective action. We were very keen to finish this year, which is 2013, below the 3%. Now that was not so credible with the Commission for the simple reason that their forecast was that it will be 3.4 this year, 3.5 next year, and so on. But we had done our calculations correctly and believed that this year we would finish under the 3%. However, we still promised to take effective action, but would we do it our own way? We knew rather than cutting social services or politically sensitive and upset certain groups, and therefore you create that lack of confidence, then you stall the economy. Then we know that once GDP starts falling, there's nothing stopping you to regain your stability and your balance in the public accounts. And we did manage to convince Oloran. And we did take effective action. We had cuts, which for Malta 20 million is a lot of money. We had managed to get savings and cuts of 20 million from where there was waste, where there were over-optimistic requests for funds and so on. And we gave a detailed report to the Commission. And on the 1st of October, when we had to present the partnership program, the European Partnership Program, where and also the effective action report, two reports on the 1st of October, we told them in detail where those cuts were and why we believe that we would end this year below the 3%. Hello. The Commission came out with its own reflection and reaction to the report on effective action and declared that we did indeed take effective action and therefore no steps would be taken for this year. The Commission said that no steps will be taken against Malta regarding the effective action. So at least for this year, it's fine. The coming year is a question of the budget draft, which again was presented, like all other countries, in mid-October, where we, in detail, we said that our structural effort will be as being requested by the Commission and by the two-pack, the 0.6% on the structural balance, and therefore we will go further below the 3% to 2.1 next year. Now, I would say, what were the aims of the government and especially how the new government was going to address the CSRs, the country-specific recommendations. Sometimes you agree, sometimes you disagree with them, but in our case, we believed they were really a good assessment, because these were the assessment given by the IMF, by the rating agencies, and what they were requesting was what Malta should really address. And I'll come to them one by one. The first one was fiscal governance, but that's true, and I could say something at the end. But the more starking, unique problems or needs of the country was, number one, was energy. Malta, being an island, was completely reliant on oil, with its ravaging price volatility, and worse than that, we had very inefficient plants. And when I say very, it's very, because some of them gave 30% of what they should be producing. They were very old plants. And there was no plan for diversification. And the government had a plan of diversifying into gas, LNG, because at the moment we are not connected to Sicily, although we hope that within 5, 6, 7 years' time we would. But we would, for the moment, in 2 years' time, we'll be able to diversify into gas, whereby we will have cost savings of about 35%, of which 25% will be passed on to consumers and to industry in due course. There will also be an interconnector between Sicily and Malta. So we will now have a diversified oil, connector and gas, and that will improve the landscape and make Malta more competitive, and would be addressing the CSR number 2, where we believe that was important. Concomitant with it was the question of the energy producer, the utility, which was just bankrupt. In other words, it didn't have funds to pay back a German development bank loan way back in 25 years, and were it not to be saved by a special purpose vehicle, it would have gone bankrupt and brought down the island with it. So we have sought a strategic partner. We have found the Chinese willing to be strategic partners to take a minority shareholding of the due diligence is still going on and would be announced soon what share they would be taking. But the implication not for the energy producer, but for the government, for the contingency liabilities. Malta had about 16% of GDP contingent liabilities, still has. And through this move would be planning to cut that contingent liability by half, because there will be 200 million injected and then taken the debt, which is a very high debt. I mean, 850 million out of 1 billion is the debt of this corporation. So by taking a share in it, it would also remove half the contingent liability for the country, which is a quite significant move. And this was recognised by the Commission in its report on the reform programme. Number 2 was raising the economic growth potential. Malta's economic growth potential was falling, coming down to 1.5 from 4% way back in the early 2000s. And the reason being, because as we know, the output or the growth potential is made up of the labour force and investment and productivity. Those are the basic ingredients. And it was clear that Malta, with its second lowest labour force participation in the European Union, had a problem. The very abysmally low female participation rate, especially. There were problems which were not addressed, and we wanted to address them. So this budget, which I just had presented and approved, we have a blitz of measures all aimed to boost up the female labour participation rate and also the labour in general with senior people. But we will be introducing free childcare centres. It's a bold move, but it will cost money, but the returns are enormous for the participation and also the return in revenues as well. We also have provision for childcare centres also in the afternoon, after school, and also before school for those who want to work early. So we have various measures just to help the mothers who want to work, from removing the obstacles. This after we have extended by 2 weeks, the government had extended 2 weeks, the maternity leave. The previous government did on the strong support of the opposition at that time, that by doing that, in our case, where we have a very low female participation rate and also very short maternity leave, it would benefit. That was a result of a study done by the European Central Bank. We have various tax credits for women over 40 and also for an active ageing strategy. But more importantly, and again here it was a first for Malta, we're introducing a scheme, Making Work Pay, whereby we try to relieve the problem with people on benefits is that it doesn't pay to work. When you get a minimum wage, you will lose the benefits, you will be worse off. So people are rational. It's not they are lazy, they are rational. They don't want to work because it doesn't pay them. So now we'll be tapering these benefits by, over a 3-year period, whereby for people who find work, they will still receive a percentage of their benefits which will be tapered down over the 3 year. Also important is shifting tax from work towards consumption. So we are we have cut, and we will do it over 3 years, the middle rate for middle income people from 35 to 25 over 3 years, and gradually increasing the tax on consumption, various excise duties which we have increased this year. And that would relieve the burden on work and therefore hopefully continue increasing the economic growth. Coming to the quality of the labour force, again Malta is a first and at the wrong end. We have the highest ratio of early school leavers. We have very good university, a very good technical, polytechnic and so on, but however, in a certain strata in secondary school, they don't continue till they get a certificate and therefore become almost useless in the labour force, in the sense that in day and age you need to have an element of secondary education. And there again we have a strategy. We coupled with the youth guarantee, where we will hopefully also with help from the European Union here, is that we will address the needs, not in the employment or in education, and various other schemes. The reform then is, the next one is what attracts investment. We needed a justice reform. Again here Malta had the longest period of time for cases to be completed in the courts of law. They've always been resisted, and now with me here the report has just been completed for a thorough justice reform. An ex-Chief Justice has undertaken this work, and similarly for a health reform. So we are also looking at what is being an obstacle to greater investment in Malta. Regarding pensions, we have a slight disagreement here because we've just had a reform some years back and increased the age to 65. The Commission is pushing us to go further up. There is a political resistance, but at least in the interim, I've just will be introducing next year the third pillar pensions in Malta, which didn't exist before. We've done the legislation and the regulation are prepared for that. So these are on the reform front. In conclusion, perhaps then I will answer the questions, but on the excessive deficit procedure, because this is quite important, and first also due to some disagreement with the Commission. Now, when we were in opposition or when we were here, I was quite critical for, that against anybody who is too optimistic in the growth or in revenues, which then higher than what the Commission is more prudently forecasting. This time around, we did the other way around. The Commission is forecasting higher economic growth than our ministry. That's not a big problem, because at least we are not forecasting higher revenues, and therefore expenditure has been more in control because of that. But then we have agreed to disagree on a mistake which we believe they have made regarding the tax elasticities. They are forecasting a 3.4% deficit, and now from the minister point of view, we're in November, and we know from the Treasury what's coming in and what we are spending, and we know that we are on track. So we are just saying, let this year finish and the problem will resolve itself. And then in the spring forecast, we hope that that will be revised more the way it should be. I think I will stop here. There are many things I can, but I'm sure by answering the questions I will be able to touch on them.
Thank you very much, Edward. Thank you. It's actually an extra delight to hear where you succeed and where you find difficulties in practising what we've preached, as you say.